Do you like my t-shirt?
Oxford comma.
Yeah, if you're not watching and you're just listening, I bought this t-shirt specifically because of Denise. It's the Oxford Comma Preservation Society. I was going to buy her one too, but I didn't want to waste my money. So
yeah, I don't feel like it's very necessary.
You're wrong.
And I just, I know that some people need it. So
people need it.
Sprinkle it
yes,
to
those of us
avoid
who
confusion.
Appreciate clear communication.
Please just hold your breath. Every door looks better when you keep it closed. Keep your head down and don't watch your step. No point in even trying now, just let it go. Maybe they will write this scene for me. Maybe this was really just a dream. Don't wanna take that risk and try to see a 9 to 5 open security. I'm sure, but I can guarantee you that's no way to live. Way to live. Promise that's no way to live. Way to live.
Hey guys, how's my hair look?
Hair looks great.
Yay. Hello.
I was hoping you were going to do like an echo. Hello, 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 hello.
I was thinking Mrs. Doubtfire.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Prodigal Peas in a Pod.
Woo!
I am Denise Acosta.
I'm Brooke Ackerman.
Yay! And we're back. So last episode, we talked about our calling, like how it started. We're going to take it a little bit further. So instead of the how it started, we're going to talk about how it's going, how it's looked like for us, how it is looking, and some of those challenges. So let's get started.
Okay, so what you all need to know, well, you don't need to know, but I want to tell you, is that Denise makes up these amazing note sheets for us, and they have our little Prodigal Peas on there, and they're adorable. And one of her questions here in the beginning says that we could share a funny behind-the-scenes moment related to something that's going on in our lives right now. So, Denise, would you like to share a funny moment?
I probably have several. And as I was just saying earlier, you know how when somebody asks you a question, you have answers, but you just can't think about it at the time. Your mind goes absolutely blank. That's me. That's me.
Great.
Because now I can't think of anything.
I don't think I have any funny moments. All of my funny moments lately have been on the podcast with you. Oh my goodness. You all, we have so many things that I have to edit out of these podcasts. So many things. It's really, really funny. We need like a B-roll for sure. Maybe we should just
That needs to be one. Yeah.
Just release all of the B-roll.
Because we are funny. We're so funny.
We think so anyway.
So the only thing I can really think of right now is when I did my first intro video on Misfit. And because I was like, oh, I got to get used to being in front of the camera. We're doing this podcast and I need to start making more videos. And I was just filming like from start to finish. And it was awful. So I'd be like, hey guys, I don't even know. Oh, hey Misfit fam. I don't know what I said. But then like the next sentence over, I'd messed it up. So I'd have to start over. And I did this probably 40 times. And so it's hard to keep the same hype right on the 40th time. And I'm like, man, whatever. We're just going to roll with it. And I remember telling you that story when we were here recording the first time. And you're like, yeah, you just keep going. You just edit it out. And I was like, what? And I was like, I didn't think about any of that. I just had to make sure it was good from start to finish. It still wasn't good, but it was better than better than the first one.
It was good. What you put out there for the world to see, I thought was good.
Oh, thanks.
Sure.
It took several tries to get comfortable.
Yeah.
So you're like, hey, Misfit family. It's like, oh, hey, guys. It's like, and you have all these different tones that you're doing, and you're like, what is my vibe? Okay. So what is the creative stuff we're doing right now? Because it is not what we've spent most of our lives doing. Maybe to some degree, but I think the bigger, what would you call it, like the calling or career or whatever, has changed.
Yes. I think it's funny that you said we've not been doing it for most of our lives. And I started to think about I actually I have been helping people navigate their stories for a long time. I just wasn't doing it in any official capacity. My first professional job was as a classroom teacher. And so students would want to talk to you about different things. We had to focus on whatever the topic was that day, whether it was grammar or writing or reading a novel or whatever. But it's funny that all through my life, even when I was a little kid, and I think we mentioned this last time, people would ask me things like, I don't really know why, but I feel like I want to talk to you about this thing that's going on in my life. And even though that wasn't my job, that wasn't my career path, it showed up so many different times. And so when you said that, I was like, yes, but no, but yes, because teacher, no, I wasn't supposed to be a counselor or a coach, but I kind of functioned in that role anyway. And then as a youth pastor, definitely functioned in that role. And so I feel like, and we're going to talk about this more in depth later in this episode, but your calling and your career can be in line, but your calling can show up in places no matter what your career is. And so I feel like that's really kind of what happened for me, is that it did show up way more often than I realized, even though it wasn't my official title.
Well, now I'm wondering if coaching is going to be a part of my future, because as you're talking, I'm recalling a lot of people trauma dumping on me throughout life.
Yeah.
And talking about things. So maybe, we'll see.
I think you'd make an excellent coach.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we talked a little bit, I think last episode, childhood memories, signs where we were being creative at an early age, and where that's manifested in life. So if we go back to that for a little bit, and we think back on what we wanted to be when we grew up, how did that transpire to where you are today, where we are today? But I'll let you start.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I wanted to be a bunch of different things, but the one that really stood out and stayed consistent was that I wanted to be a teacher. And then I specifically wanted to be an English teacher, and that's exactly what I did.
Oxford comma t-shirt.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I see it.
Yes, I'm glad you see it. Now just use it. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, spent 15 years, I can't even remember, in the public school system. Loved my job. Loved it. Thought I was going to do it until retirement age. And then felt like God shifted me out of the classroom, but he didn't tell me what he was shifting me to, which was really weird and difficult, but also very exciting.
He's like that.
He really is. He likes adventure, and he doesn't like to necessarily give us all the details about the adventure. Something to do with, like trusting him and having faith.
Crazy.
It's really strange. So, yeah, I left teaching, even though I loved it. I loved my school. I loved my coworkers. And I really didn't know why for 3 years. I taught myself to sew. That was fun. And then I was approached about being a youth pastor, which had you said something to me 3 years prior about working in ministry, I would have laughed at you. I would have laughed long and hard about working in ministry. Yeah.
Ditto.
Right? And so then I'm approached about being a youth pastor, and I was talking to the people in my life who we run those things by, and they said, this sounds like it's tailor-made for you. This sounds like God said, this is for you, Brooke. And it really did. And I did that for 5 years, and it was so fun and stretching, and oh my goodness, but I was still teaching. I was still counseling, coaching. It was interesting how the things that I had done previously in my life were also being used in that job. It was just in a slightly different way. And then I felt another shift, and I feel like it has changed a lot, the trajectory for me, but at the same time, there are so many common elements and common connection points that it doesn't feel like a drastic change. It feels like the title has changed, and maybe the emphasis of different things has, like, now this is under the spotlight rather than so much teaching was more the spotlight and some coaching, and now it's coaching with some teaching, because in coaching people, I'm still doing some teaching so that it benefits them and the things that we've been talking about in their sessions with me. So yes, change, evolution, but still so many common elements.
Okay.
How about you?
How about me?
Yeah.
Well, mine is a roller coaster of different things. I think growing up as a kid, I always wanted to be a teacher. I used to do a little classroom and all that stuff. But then as I got older, I wanted to go into criminal justice. And so in just listening to what you were saying, I'm kind of seeing some of the connections here. And I really wanted to be a lawyer because I wanted to defend people that couldn't afford a good lawyer, and they were innocent people and they deserved a good defense case. And so I wanted to do that, except that's a lot of schooling, you guys. And I was not in that mindset. If you knew me back then, you probably heard how quickly that did not last. But I did do 2 years of criminal justice in high school, and that was a lot of fun. So from there, I was in daycare, and I still really liked that. I kind of ended up just falling into the international business industry with various jobs, and I was just kind of filling a position there. There were things that I liked about it, but I don't know, I guess it was a job. And there was a lot of stuff that I was dealing with personally for feeling like I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So eventually I had started baking cupcakes, and from scratch, no, sorry, not from scratch first. It was a box cake mix. And that went horribly wrong because I hated the kitchen. And so I don't really know how I fell into that. But eventually, some of them came out good. And some of my friends, God bless them, were like, you should sell these. And I'm like, okay, who would buy them? To be fair, if I had pictures of the first ones, you'd probably side with me on that's a crazy idea. But, they got it in my head. And I'm like, all right, let's try it out. I was in the job that I had was very unhealthy, and I hated every single day more and more. And so I thought to myself, well, I'm not getting any younger, so I can at least try this out and see if it'll amount to anything.
I'm not getting any younger. I like it. You sound like you're on death's door.
I was probably still in my 20s.
Oh, man, I'm so glad
remember.
you figured it out before you got decrepit.
No, I didn't. So I leaped into cupcakes, and it did well. I enjoyed a lot of it. I got to create a ton, which I really liked. I don't like being super bad at things, and so I would keep trying if I was really bad, which is how this accidentally became a career. Accidentally. And so a lot of shifts, and I think the one common thing throughout all of those so far up to that point had been I always liked helping people. So if it wasn't my job, I was doing something else, whether it's like with a nonprofit or just things that I would hear or see people, friends. If I was able to help, I wanted to help. So with cupcakes, I was able to partner alongside with a lot of nonprofits, but even then there was still quite a bit missing. About years ago now, when I became intentional about my faith, I also ended up joining a few ministries at church. So the first one was jail ministry. And then I was teaching a little bit in our small group. So we did a whole thing on women in the Bible. And that was fun. And I actually interviewed this one over here for one of those weeks. And so, it's just been a lot of different ups and downs, or just you think things wouldn't connect. And this is the one area that I have felt so fulfilled anytime I'm doing any kind of my work. So whether it's Misfit brand or jail ministry or global missions, we talked about Peru in the first episode, writing for the storytelling team, I don't know, just whatever comes up that I can help in. I get the most enjoyment out of that. And so I just find that it's interesting, all these different turns that everything took, and this is where I am. I don't know that anybody would have seen this one coming. Oh yeah, at some point I wanted to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I really liked those classes when I did take those in school. I really liked them. So I always thought that could be neat. And so being a spiritual mentor in jail ministry is probably the closest thing I have to coaching. And I love that when I get to have my own mentee and do the one-on-ones with them.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's what I do all the time. It's so fun. Even though you're walking with people in their tough places in their stories, it's still, I know when I say to other people that it's fun, I'm like, maybe that's not the best word. It's really fulfilling. It brings me joy. But yeah, feels fun.
I find it's fun.
Yeah, because when you get to see the Holy Spirit show up for other people and the way that God shows up, that's just...
Being able to see someone grow in their understanding of God, understanding of themselves and their past and how those traumas affected them and so forth, all of that, I think it's really exciting.
Me too.
They're growing, and then you get to see like more of that joy filling their heart and their space rather than the darkness.
All the other stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so all right, so we were talking about creativity showing up at a young age, and again, so we're moving along, but in the same umbrella of discussion. So the work that we're doing now, how would you qualify that as creative, or where do you see the creativity showing up for you in your now line of work?
I don't know if I would have seen it this way had it not been for the people who trained me. Shout out to Bob and Polly Hamp, Think Differently Academy. Check them out, tdacad.com. I'll put a link in. You'll be able to find them. But one of the many, many things that they often talked about is there's really no formula for coaching, because each person that you're sitting with, their story is unique, their life is unique, their perspective is unique. And so while there are some things that are helpful to multiple people, we were encouraged in our coaching certification to not lock ourselves into being rigid or following these 5 steps or these 10 steps, because that, again, while there are some common things that are helpful to multiple people, the idea of be willing to do improvisation, and I don't mean like in the comedy sense, but be willing to stay curious, be willing to leave room for the Holy Spirit to be part of the conversation. And so while I can help people who are believing things about themselves that aren't true, that's a common thing, but the lie that each person is believing and the way that we have to navigate that, I have to leave room for creativity and what's going to land for this person over that person. Because if I use an example or a metaphor or a way of helping them see differently for this person, that's not necessarily going to land for the next person. And so in that sense, I feel like the creativity that happens for me in a coaching session isn't so much coming from me, it's me staying open to where God wants to move in this person's life. And then it's just so fun. Sometimes there will be a thought that pops into my mind and I know that wasn't my thought. It's from the Holy Spirit. And I'll say it to the person and it immediately clicks. And they'll say something like, yeah, that reminds me of when I was a kid. And it's so immensely creative that I stay in touch with God. And then I get to watch how he uses creativity with each person. And so it's like I was saying before, that is fun to watch how God shows up for each person. He is immensely creative, and that I get to partner with that and be a part of that process is really cool.
That is fun, seeing God showing up in everyone's lives. Sometimes when we're the ones in the situation, it may be hard for us to recognize certain things that are happening or being said, done, whatever have you. But being on the outside, looking in on somebody else's, and you can see those little like God winks that happen is so fun. It's so fun. Well, for me, creative in the literal sense of, so Misfit of Creation, I have the Etsy store and I've created a ton of content there, study tools, charts, devotionals, a lot of different things in there. And the idea there is simplifying concepts that the Bible has talked about, or even just doing quick studies into actual books. The point is to create a document that makes it easier to understand, because the Bible can be overwhelming when you're just starting out. I know it was for me.
Offers a different perspective.
Yeah. So, it's easy to be like, oh, just open the book and start reading. Okay, sure. But like, what am I supposed to get out of that? Like, all right, I saw that Jesus wept, and then what? Like, if you don't know, you don't know. Mm-hmm. And so, all right, well, let's start on some basics. And so creatively putting these kinds of things together, knowing that there's different levels of understanding, different methods that people use. And so I get to use a lot of colors. I love putting cartoon Jesus on these documents any chance that I can get. That's like my own personal enjoyment that I get from that. But also being able to simplify things visually. So, for example, I've been reading a ton of the prophets lately. I finished the major prophets. I'm finishing up the minor prophets. Sorry, backwards. I finished all the minor prophets. I'm going to the major prophets right now. And so I've developed some charts, like visual side by side on what each one talks about. So for me, I have that. I have different ways of creating information. I have the social medias, and so I have content that I put there that's free. So reflective stuff or videos, and so all of that is creating things. We have the podcast now, and you know, we're just creative people. And so I feel like literally everything that I'm doing is creative, whether in the artistic sense, because I didn't know I was a graphic designer, but I am apparently. And so
not apparently, you are.
So the artistic side that we mostly understand, like painting, drawing, and all that, I get to do all those kinds of things, but also just creatively putting together information in a way that might be easier to understand for someone else, whether just starting out, as well as someone who's already well into their faith and they're very seasoned and they're looking to get something deeper. I have stuff for that too. So yeah, that's been kind of fun to see the various areas of creativity that shows up in what I do now.
You know what's really jumping out at me as you're talking about all of that is I know we both had said that when we were little, we wanted to be teachers, and what you're creating and designing and what's for sale on your Etsy site it's exactly what teachers do for students. It's called scaffolding. You take what could be a more complex thing to learn, to think about, and you break it down into more manageable chunks, or you actually create a structure that then lets them enter into the learning process where it's not just find the right answer, it's explore, but it's supported, it's structured, and that's why it's called scaffolding, is because you're taking them from where they are and encouraging them and supporting them in the stepping out and learning more without feeling like you've just stepped off a cliff and you have nothing. And so you are teaching, even though it's not in a classroom, even though it's not a one-on-one setting, you're teaching the Bible through the things that you're creating.
That's so fun, because now we're full circle. Back to where Denise started. Little Denise, who wanted to be a teacher, and she would teach her stuffed animals.
Yeah.
I remember those days. They were so sweet. Okay, well, since you've been kind of coaching for most of your life.
Yeah.
Was there a pivot moment where God has rerouted your vision for that?
Yes, there was a pivot moment in the sense of he started to move me out of ministry into wrapping my mind around the idea of a more entrepreneurial pursuit, which in my experience, I would have told you I am not an entrepreneur. That's not how my mind works. And lo and behold, here I am.
I wanted nothing to do with having my own business.
Oh, no. I mean, I did in the sense of, in the romantic sense of I wanted to own a bed and breakfast somewhere,
Italy, for sure.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's what I thought when I was younger, but now absolutely a bed and breakfast in Italy.
There's still time.
Okay. But I didn't think of it in the sense of having to run the practice. And it's just me. There's nobody else John Ackerman, my husband, absolutely helps me. But
Hi, John.
As far as knowing what to do and keeping track of finances and all those kind, I didn't think about that side of owning a business. And God has been so kind that he has put people in my life who know those kinds of things, and they're lovely, and they just help me because they're my friends and they love me and they take care of me. So that part is great. But I was talking to...
Can I actually pause you for a second? So you're talking about the people that God has put in your life. And what jumped out at me right away is, how do we know if God's really calling us into something? He's showing up in support. So he's not leaving you high and dry to figure this out on your own. He's moving people, the right people, to help you out and to show up as needed, how it's needed to continue pursuing your calling.
Yeah, because that was one of the conversations I had with him as I could feel the shift happening even more. I was like, God, I don't know how to do this part and that part and this part. And immediately different people that I already know started their faces popped into my mind. And it felt like God said, you don't have to, because you know these people. And because you know them, they will help you. And that was definitely one of those, it was a pivot moment. There have been a lot of little shifts that have happened. And that was one of them, is that I don't actually have to know all of the things, because God is putting a support structure in my life. And I was having a conversation toward the end of my training and certification with Bob and Polly Hamp, and I was talking to them about wanting to move in the route of coaching, but I felt like there were a lot of question marks. There was a lot that I felt like, but I don't know how to do this, and I don't know if I'm ready. And the question of, well, what do I really have to offer? And they were asking me about what I was currently doing, and I was explaining different things. And I will forever love that Polly said this to me. She said, "You're already doing the job, so why aren't you doing the job?" And that it completely shifted my perspective. And I was like, I don't know. Why am I not doing the job? And that comment, there are still days, of course, where I have those questions pop up of, am I really making a difference? And is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I really in the right avenue? Because doubts, especially when you are absolutely doing what God has designed you to do, man, does the enemy want to derail that. And I still hear her say to me, "You're already doing the job, so why aren't you doing the job?" Love it.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's
Thanks,
so true.
Polly.
I haven't met you yet, Polly, but you sound great.
Oh, you both, absolutely, you're going to meet each other. You have to.
Yay.
Yeah. How about you?
How about me? Was there a moment when it changed? For sure. A little bit differently in my case. So cupcakes, the last year, 2 years that I was doing cupcakes, I knew that I wasn't going to do that forever. I always somehow knew that the next logical step was to open a brick and mortar. And I would get that so many times. People would ask me, "Oh, when are you going to open your store? When are you going to open your store?" And I never wanted to. And something about me just always knew that this just isn't really what forever is going to be for me on a career path. And I couldn't have told you, anything else that would have substituted that. I had no idea until I started getting involved in ministry. And I don't know how much time we have, but I'm going to try to get through the story and hopefully we can fit it. So business was really, really bad. And I'm not talking like it was a low season. I mean, it tanked night and day. And so the responsible business owner is going to be, checking your numbers, you're looking into marketing, you're reaching out, you're cold calling, you're doing all these things. And no, I was not. I was involved in a few ministries at church and I loved everything about it. And the more I was in the ministries, the more I was doing in them, and I just wanted to. And so the time that I was supposed to be spending working on the business, I would work on my ministry things. And there's zero income coming from that. So financial problems were real. And I remember praying about it and asking God, okay, so we know the situation. This is where we're at. Do you want me to focus on ministry, or do you want me to resuscitate this business? And I felt like he told me to go ahead and follow into ministry. And I had no idea how that was going to pan out. So mostly because all of them were not paying. All the ones that I was in are all volunteer. So I don't know where money was going to come from. And so it came to the last year of cupcakes, 6 months prior, that summer prior. As much as I wanted to cut cold turkey, I was like, I don't want to do that to my clients. I love my clients. And so I scaled back and I sent out a notice and they were very supportive. But I knew that I was going to ultimately cut it off, and I just didn't exactly know when. I didn't feel like God had told me the right time yet and what I was going to be doing. Eventually, God gave me this idea to launch my own ministry. And so Misfit of Creation was born. And that sounds great, except for all I knew was that it was going to be a launched digital ministry, and it was going to be where I'm getting income from. I don't know how. And that's it. Oh, and the name. And that's about all I had.
Man, he really does not like to give us the full picture.
No.
He really doesn't.
Yeah. And so, people think you're crazy. People thought I was crazy, even if they didn't say it. And I get it. And so it's like, okay, well, how are you going to do that? And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, okay,
you should figure that out.
You should figure that out, right? But I'm trying to be aligned with what God had wanted me to do. And so, I'm taking it day by day because he doesn't just lay out this entire blueprint for you. Blueprint. He doesn't just lay that all out for you. And so I knew that I kept wanting to do this, but cupcakes just felt like that nagging, Sorry, child, but you know what I mean? Like, it's like just always trying to get your attention and you're so focused on something else. Sorry for those of you with children. But maybe you can understand what I'm saying. And so finally I felt like I got the okay from God. I remember it was New Year's Eve. It was that morning. And I woke up and I was like, that's it. We're closing down cupcakes. Okay, today's the day. And I got online, I did my whole write-up thanking clients, and this is it, and closed everything out. I was so quick to close down that website, everything. And so I'm like, this is great. It's going to be awesome. And so it felt like a huge burden was taken off of me. And I'm like, yes, all right, so I'm going to be fully immersed in this, and I'm spending all my time on this and trying to navigate how this is going to work, because not everything, I don't want everything to be for profit or that you need to pay. I want there to still be a lot of things that are still helpful and available easily and on an everyday basis. So trying to put all those things together. But that big moment for me was when I finally got the okay to close down cupcakes and start this and make the announcement, worked on a logo, and just all these things all over again. And it's been actually really interesting in seeing all the things that I maybe should have done for cupcakes, which I just didn't want to do and didn't do. I am so on the ball for this stuff, right? Like these little things, the little notes that I have for our episodes, I was never this organized before, ever, which kind of brings into the next thing. So how is this shaping our mindset, maybe our schedule, even our soul? And so for me, I'd say it's definitely schedule right away, because I juggle a lot of different things. I'm still in those ministries. That never stopped. I've just now added my own that I'm trying to launch from scratch, something I've never done before. And if you had known me 20 years ago and told me that I would be doing my own ministry, I would have laughed for a very long time too. Did not see that one coming. But in the midst of having to juggle all these different tasks and then making sure mom is okay, take care of mom too, I find that the question that comes up often for me is, how do you find time to do all these things? And I'm always like, I don't know. That is 100% all God, because I, for those of you who know me, can attest to this, I'm terrible at time management. Oh my gosh. And so the fact that all of this is happening visually in my head, I feel like it's juggling. And then every now and then God throws in something and we're like, all right. And so we're just going with it and figuring it out. And it's like, all right, cool. So I think for sure scheduling is where it shows up the most, and how to make things happen. It's very easy to get caught up in the whole, well, I don't have time to do this. If I had more time, I would do that. But I found that just stepping out in faith, if that's where God is calling you to do something, it just works out.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
it just works out.
Isn't it interesting how it can feel scary, but also there's this sense of peace and this is right at the same time. And when you're in line with him, it's not all up to you. Yeah. And so it just seems to work out. And that doesn't mean there aren't difficult moments.
No, for sure.
But it does. It does. But your metaphor of juggling and then something else gets thrown in, that's a really good description, I should say, not explanation. Yeah. Yeah.
What about you, ma'am?
Yeah, the scheduling thing. It's interesting because I went from being a classroom teacher where your schedule is dictated for you. You teach when the class times are. You have a very specific lunchtime, and it's always way, way, way too short. I don't know how any teacher does it. That was one of the things I loved about when I left teaching, was that I could eat whenever I wanted, and I could take as long as I want. I could go to the bathroom whenever I wanted, because you can't leave your students. And,
that's amazing.
Yeah. So your schedule is very dictated. And then when I was a stay-at-home dog mom for 3 years, a friend of mine said to me, just because you have available time doesn't mean you have to fill it. And that started me on a very long journey to learn what to say yes to, and more importantly, what to say no to, and that was allowed, and that it was okay. And even more than that, it was healthy.
Yeah.
Because I would have absolutely I'm available. So of course I will do X, Y, Z. I will help you. I will do this. And then feeling like I need to earn it just fits right in so nicely in a very unhealthy way there.
And so by the way, when I say it's not because I know that and you should be doing that. It's because I also had to learn.
Yeah.
Still learning. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's, I'm really glad that I started to learn that before I became a youth pastor, because, man, do you want to be available to those kids anytime they need you? You want to put everything you have into whatever message you're doing that Sunday or an activity you're doing midweek. And I'm so glad that I already started learning before that setting boundaries was healthy, that it wasn't selfish, it wasn't unkind, it wasn't, for goodness sake, if there are stories in the Bible where Jesus is like, peace out, I'm going to go talk to God for a little bit. I'm going to go take some time to myself. So if the Savior of the world set boundaries, I that's probably a good thing for me too. And so then, and in some cases, being a youth pastor, some of my schedule was dictated because I'm working for a church. And so you have to be at certain places at certain times. But then starting my own coaching practice, I get to dictate my schedule. And that was hard for me at first because I wanted to be available all the time, because what if a client needed to meet at whatever time on this day, and what if I don't have available time that day? And so then I'm not only not helping that person, but when I meet with people, that's my income. Mm-hmm. And so to have to adjust and allow myself to say, this is when I'm available and I'm not available on these days and at this time, it was a bigger struggle than I ever thought it was going to be. But I'm still learning that. I'm still learning to say yes to some things and say no to other things. And doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make me a bad coach. It doesn't mean I'm being selfish. And I don't know how anybody does anything like this without God. Because I ask him all the time, like, what do you say? How do you want me to do this? And he's lovely and he tells me. And so it's not all on me, even though I'm the one that's making the schedule for myself. It's just really funny how much thought that has taken up, is figuring out my own schedule.
Hey guys, so if it sounds like it just cut off in the middle of a sentence, it's because we did. We like to talk a lot, if you haven't noticed, and so we are extending this episode. We are making this one too. So you'll see the rest of it in the next one. Thanks for tuning in to our podcast, Prodigal Peas in a Pod. I'm not sure how you found us today, but just want to make sure you know all the platforms we are on. And those are Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Amazon Music.
And if you would like to reach us directly, you can send us an email at prodigalpeas@gmail.com.
So since this podcast is a merge of both of our brands, mine is Misfit of Creation, and if you're looking to get more information on that, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and the Etsy shop, which is where you can find all those downloadable tools and products.
And if you'd like to find out more about my coaching practice, you can find me at blueprintheartandmind.com, where I have a blog, totally free. Come check it out. And you can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. See you next time.
Bye.
I think I get it now. I need to be myself, because a copycat can only do so well. In love with everything that makes me who I am. Don't need a backup plan. I hope they understand that I'm doing better today. I got me a mission that got some fruition. You down to stay out the way. Can't seek validation from people who hating. I got my mentality straight. Shout out to God, I've been keeping the first. He been working and paving the way. And now I can guarantee you that's the way to live. Way to live. Promise that's the way to live. Way to live. Promise that's the way to live.
I have a lot of different kinds of lip stains. And I saw this one color that I don't remember ever buying, but it was in there. It was like a pale pink, and I'm like, oh, this could be good. And so I put it on, and then I look in the mirror, and 30 seconds later, I was like, oh my gosh, like, turn it off. I'm like, the candle's already going, and I'm like trying to wipe it off, and I'm like, oh man.
And I don't know what it is. Just you try to get it off. When you want it to come off, it doesn't come off.
No.
You take one bite of food, it's like you never applied anything. Where